We start in a city called Shangzhen, Divine City. Here the protagonist appears on a rooftop of a building, while the crowd applauds and worships him. He tells us that there were 500 years of war and that in it many brothers were sacrificed, but that everything was over. And Te shouting addresses the crowd saying that being here, he will not allow more wars in this world. The people call him Venerable Immortal and thank him for bringing peace to the world. In another scene, we are on the throne on the roof of the Venerable Immortal. Here the prota tells us from his memories that 500 years ago, heaven and earth suddenly changed, and all living beings had divine power. A chaotic war began that lasted more than 500 years, known as the Age of Apocalypse, and after countless life and death challenges, he had become invincible. So with his power that had no equal in the world, a very powerful and overwhelming power, with his blows he made all forces at peace. And so finally the world marked the beginning of peace. Back to the throne on the roof of the Venerable Immortal. Ling Yunfeng, who is our protagonist in this story, was sitting on his throne thinking that at last he could have a good rest, and that just now he would enjoy that precious silence. But at that, a guy comes up to him, and Ling asks him if he had given the order that no one could come to him, as long as he remained in that place. It turns out that the boy who had approached him was his younger brother, who tells Ling that the order did not apply to him. To which Ling replies that he would do anything for his little brother and asks him what it was all about. At that point shows him a letter saying that this was the secret letter of Taoist leader Qian Fangsu's Yin talisman. At that Ling tells us a little bit about this girl, and says that she is an extremely conceited woman who never asks for help. So Ling wonders why she would send him a secret Yin talisman, which they agreed among all the sects in the world would only be used in case of emergency. Ling takes the letter and tells his little brother that he could go now. As the boy leaves to say goodbye, we see that Ling is still thinking about what happened with the letter, and says he suddenly remembers a humiliating past. In our protagonist's memories, he tells us that 15 years ago, when he was cultivating the mental ability called Primordial Chaos of 9 Turns of the Heart, in a cold lake of a secret realm, at the critical moment when he was cultivating to overcome the passage of life and death, this woman had suddenly interrupted. Qian appeared out of nowhere embracing Ling, to which he asks her who was she, and how dare she interrupt him. But at that, some subjects who were apparently chasing the girl to kill her, and one of them tells her that he did not expect that with her cultivation, she could go so far to find help after being affected by a powerful aphrodisiac. At that, one of the subjects swoops in to kill them both, but Ling easily manages to eliminate them and save the girl. But at that instant, Ling feels his heart racing and says that he can't breathe, and that he is going to go crazy because of that. Then he leaves the girl collapsed on the ground to rest, while he continues with his cultivation and says that he should control his breathing and concentrate on guiding the spiritual energy to transform it, so he should regulate his spiritual energy. But at that, Qian hugs him from behind and sees him in a very erotic way, at which Ling wonders what she was trying to do, and Ling curses, because she could not move now, for if she moves, all her previous efforts will be in vain. So Ling claims to Qian and asks her to get out of that place, but she was very excited and tells him that it was something urgent, because she needed to be detoxified. Qian kisses him and the two end up making love. After that, Ling was trying once again to finish her cultivation, when Qian tells her that if he should have difficulties in the future, he could use her name. To which she introduces herself as Qian Fangsu, and tells him that this will be his reward for helping her with her detox. At that, Ling becomes indignant and wonders if this is what that legend Fuigo says, and he also wants her to leave since she had tarnished his innocence, and that he would always remember her. Back in the present, Ling thinks that had been a very humiliating memory for him, as he was the hero of the world, but Qian Fangsu had used it as another tool to detoxify himself. Then in another memory, we see these two again. But this time they were in a battle of various sects to surround and suppress the demonic sects. At that, she approaches him and mentions that this was the first time they had met, and once again introduces herself as Qian Fangsu, commander of the Taoist sect. To which Ling embarrassedly replies that it was a pleasure to meet her, although he felt he had known her before. Qian replies that she always forgets men's faces. At that, Ling narrates that what bothered him most about her was that they had worked together many times, but this woman still treated him as a stranger, but that she had enough courage and bravery not to lose to any man, and that she had also risked her life for peace, and that after years of war, she had become the Taoist leader. Back to the present, we see that from the letter comes a holographic message from Qian that said that tonight, at midnight on the back mountain of the Taoist sect, he was to go to the peak of no return to discuss some matters, so he should be sure to attend. At that, Ling is very annoyed and thinks that now that the demons and foreign invaders have basically been suppressed, He wonders what urgent matters will be so important to use the yin talisman. Already at night, we find ourselves in the temple of the Taoist sect, at the peak of no return. Here we see Ling arrive and he questions why Qian had chosen that kind of place, and what made him remember that humiliating moment. At that, Ling enters the temple and sits down at one of the tables to wait. But a mysterious shadow approaches him from behind that calls him Divine Venerable, and tells him that he had arrived early. To which Ling turns and replies that in all the world, the fact that the Taoist leader Qian Fengsu had used the yin talisman to see him had aroused his curiosity just for that alone. Having arrived at the place, Qian sits down with Ling and brews some tea with his powers, and tells him that this was the famous Dang Pao tea from 500 years ago. At that, Ling asks him to tell him what she was up to which Qian replied that it was about their son. But Ling had not analyzed the situation well and asked him what was wrong with his son. At that moment, Ling thought things over and was surprised by the news. So much so, that he ends up spitting the tea in Qian's face and asks her if he had heard correctly, and if she had said they had a child. Qian asks him to calm down, but he doesn't listen and gets more upset and bangs the table. Ling asks him if this was some kind of joke, since apart from fighting a few battles together, she and he had no friendship or affection. So she asks him where did this supposed son come from. But Ling remembers that time at the river, and Qian tells him that he is right, that it was that time she borrowed him to detox. To which Ling replies somewhat indignantly that she was finally admitting it, since the times they had fought together, she acted as if nothing had ever happened. He also tells her that he often thought it was some hallucination, and that he was going crazy. But at that, Qian very calmly asks him to please calm down, and tells him that it wasn't his fault. But Ling is getting more and more upset and asks her how she expects him to be calm, since all his life he had treated the girls with a lot of respect and equality, and had never been prone to or crossed the line with any of them. He also claims that she just used him as a tool, and then when he was done, she just slapped him on the back and asked him to go get dressed without even saying grace. Here we see how Qian finally breaks his calm and exclaims, sarcastically telling the protagonist that he will now shout louder so that everyone in the cult will know what has happened. As we see Ling looking very embarrassed, Qian asks him why is he so nervous, since that had not been his fault. To which Ling questions that this was true, since he had done nothing wrong, and wonders what is it that makes him so nervous. And he tells Qian that the fault was hers alone. To which Qian replies that he was right, and that over the years she had never thought about who would be in charge. At that, Ling interrupts her, asking her to wait, and as we see Qian confused, Ling tells her that he needed to calm down first. After drinking all the tea that was there, he tells Qian, very sure of himself, that having reached this point, he could only do one thing. As we see Qian surprised and not understanding anything, Ling asks him to get married. To which Qian, even more surprised, asks him if she had heard correctly. At that moment, the Prota takes a lump of coal, and with its power forges an engagement ring, surprising Qian for all that he was doing. Ling tells the girl that even though she and he have no feelings for each other, but if there was a child involved there was nothing else to do. He then asks her to choose the day of their wedding while he gives her the ring. But Qian, very embarrassed, tells him that he had misunderstood, because she had no intention of marrying him. To which Ling asks him if she was joking, and she also asks him why did she come to him so suddenly and tell him that they had a child. At that moment, Qian very sensually and mysteriously gets up and approaches the Prota to whisper something in his ear. But while Ling is surprised by what this girl had said to him, they both blush and grieve and are left in a position of much romantic tension. After this awkward situation, Ling gets up from the table to leave and tells him that she will think about it again, and that she will give him an answer in the next few days. But at that, Qian asks her to wait, and asks if it hadn't occurred to him that she was lying to him when she suddenly told him that they both had a child. To which Ling replies that to tell the truth, he didn't have a good impression of her after their first meeting, as he thought she was just a self-centered and very rude woman. But that in that decisive battle they had faced together, her courage to kill the enemy made him change his mind about her, as he had taken a little affection for her. He also tells her that he had sometimes even thought of being a brother to her, but that the marriage between them is not something he dislikes completely. At that, Qian gets angry and yells at her that no one cares about being her brother, and demands that she hurry up and find a solution. To which Ling replies that they will meet in a few days and leave the place. Now as Ling is flying through the sky, he wonders what he is supposed to do, and noticing that his heart had become overexcited, he thinks to himself that he should calm down, for his mental strength had been honed to the point where no one could influence his emotions. He reminds himself that he has fought against heaven and earth, against thousands of strong enemies, and he had never flinched from it. Then he wonders how could his heart beat so strongly now. He thinks that it could not be true and that it could not be happening to him now. Then he wonders how he turned out to have a son. In that instant he tries to keep calm, telling himself that the sudden panic made him feel very uncomfortable, so now he needed to find someone to fight with. At that moment, Ling changes his direction and now goes to the demonic sect. Already in the banished pavilion of heaven, there are two guys at the entrance, and one of them identifies him as the venerable immortal, and asks the other to sound the alarm. But Ling is very fast and arrives in just an instant, to which he tells the guys at the entrance that the alarm is too slow, and the Proto asks someone named Huan to peel. At that, the demonic sect's pavilion shudders and a girl emerges from it. She approaches Ling. He tells her that he noticed her progress, as there were not many people under the sky who can shake his golden light protector ability except her. To which the girl insults him and asks why he suddenly wanted to come and abuse people. Ling replies that he was upset and just wanted to fight a little, to which the girl accepts his challenge and the battle begins. At that moment, the demonic sect troops are talking among themselves, and one says that he thought the war was over and wonders why the Venerable One would have gone there. Another guy wonders if it could be that someone was doing things in secret and was discovered by the Venerable Saint. Another wondered if the leader had already made a breakthrough in the fight, and that it would be good for her to test all her power against the Divine Venerable One. At that, a third guy responds by calling him an idiot and tells him that since he was a newcomer, he had never seen the divine power of the Venerable Saint who killed the top 10 leaders of the demonic sect with just one move. At that, this guy asks the others to pray obediently so that the Venerable Saint would not get too angry, otherwise they would all be eliminated. Another one of the guys wonders what's the point of fighting like this, flirting with the leader at such a boring time. But another replies that they weren't even trying now. And again he asks his companions to be good and pray that His Holiness doesn't get angry and end up destroying the place to its foundations. Having finished their fight, Ling and the girl end up exhausted and thirsty, so they are cooling off a bit. At that, the girl tells Ling that every time he has something to worry about, he ends up using her to vent his anger. She also tells him that her little body can't take it anymore. To which Ling replies that when she was chasing him to test his moves, he had never complained about that, since looking at the world, only fighting against her can make him happy. The blushing girl replies that he is the only one in the world who treated her as if she were a man, and at that she asks him when would he treat her like a lady. At that, Ling taps her on the shoulder as a symbol of friendship, and tells her that they are just old sparring partners. At that, the girl asks the Proto what under the sky could be bothering him, for she was very curious. To which Ling tells her that without warning and without mental preparation, he suddenly had a child with a woman. The girl is shocked and spits her drink in Ling's face and apologizes for that, as she had not been able to help herself. At that, Ling stands up to let off steam and tells her that he knew nothing about that sort of thing and proceeds to tell her everything that had happened from the very beginning, when he is farming in that river. At that, the girl laughs and suddenly a little girl appears demanding Ling not to bully her mother. The little girl runs out to hit Ling, calling him a stinker and asking him to stay away from his mother and that she would beat him to death. Ling asks the girl if it was true that she was the mother of this little girl, and when she had had a baby and why she had not told him. She also tells her that this little girl was very adorable, so loving and attentive to her mother, as that was something rare in that cold-blooded and heartless ward. At that moment, the girl asks Ling if he was really sure that she was a lovely little girl. At that, the little girl stabs him with an attack called Immortal Destroyer Sting, and Ling tells her that that was not something for children to play with. The little girl gets very angry and again calls him a stinker, demands him to let her go and not bully her mother anymore. At that moment, Ling picks up the gun and thinks that this thing could really hurt him if he is not careful. When the gun activates a defense power, Ling claims to the girl. The girl takes the opportunity to throw a pill in his mouth. Ling tells her that she was a naughty girl, but the poison can't affect him. At that, Ling is caught by that pill and says inside that it was very bitter and disgusting, so he wonders what the hell was that pill. At that, the mother explains to Ling that it was a 5-flavored pill that the little girl had taken from her grandmother, that it wasn't very toxic, but it was extremely nasty to eat, and that the little girl knew how to use it and how to play with it. Ling angrily tells her that this was not something a little girl should be doing. Ling, because of how bitter the pill had left his mouth, he takes all the drinks that were left and angrily asks who was her father, for he would teach her a lesson for having brought her up so rudely. But the mother replies that he was her father. At that, the Proto spits the drink in her face for having taken him so unawares with the news. At that, the girl uses her power to send the little girl away, and tells him that she would explain everything later. Once they were alone together, Ling thinks the drink was strong, as it was making him hallucinate. To which the girl tells him to take some more of that drink to be more at ease. Ling takes a dozen more of that drink and asks her once again who was the father of that girl. To which the girl replies that it was him. Ling indignantly asks her why she was saying that again, and that he doesn't remember anything happening between the two of them. At that instant, the girl explains and reminds him that it had been more than 10 years ago, when she was still the sacred maiden of the heavenly pavilion, when he was initiating from his divine power, and he had gone mad and massacred many experts of the demonic sect, forcing the demons who had been fighting separately and scheming against each other to unite and finally capture him. Ling replies that he remembered, and that those vile villains had used all sorts of tricks and trickery, in that we see a memory of the war of attrition, and Ling narrates to us that dozens of days of interrupted poisoning, and that at the assault station, between battles, they kept trying to kill him, and that the fast-forming properties slowed down the war of attrition dolls, had put him on the defensive. He also tells us that after he had been captured, the two forces had returned to reality, and that they even had the power to overwhelm him, and that sinister and deceitful men became more ambitious and wanted to dominate the world. Back to reality, Ling remembers that at that moment, he had been imprisoned in the hellish prison by her, and that he almost died at that moment. To which the girl tells him that he was a child of luck, and that he was not destined to die. At that, Ling replies that in the world, she was the only one who dared to be so presumptuous with him. The girl approaches him in an insinuating manner and tells him that she had become a demoness. The girl goes on to explain to Ling that she was currently practicing the Mo Yusu Maiden's Heart technique. At that time, Ling tells her that he knew that she had a peculiar ability unique to the demonic sect, and that she could incorporate another person's methods into her own body, and that it was even more powerful than the magical ability of the northern demons' divine kung fu from hundreds of years ago. Ling then explains that the girl's sect had produced many great demons, but that this sect was also known as a universal tonic because of the great ability to help others multiply their magical power, and that this had then been seen by all, which led to the girl's sect being sparsely populated. To which the girl replies that this was true, and that after the 5 old demons captured him back then, they had conspired against her, and that they wanted to divide his magic power equally, and with that divide the entire divine state of China in one fell swoop. At that, Ling gets angry and says that those old human demons are so sneaky and deceitful, and that they were full of tricks, and that's why they had gone against the tide, as it had made him suffer a lot. Ling asks him where were they now, because he wanted to go kick their asses. To which the girl replies that she was afraid that if he saw them at that moment, he would not be angry. And while Ling is confused, the girl explains to him that the 1,000-handed demon Buddha had been destroyed by himself, and that on the day of the meeting, he is said to have attained great enlightenment and entered the way of the demon, beginning to travel far and wide to atone for the sins committed by the sutra. She also tells him that she had heard that this guy was a Buddhist mystic and a polemicist, so why would he become a demon when he clearly understood the Buddha's teachings? Ling replies that since that was so, he could not afford to hurt him or do anything to him. The girl goes on to explain to him that the ghosts of Yantian Mountain, who had created and led the ghost kings and generals of Fangea, thought they were the best in the world, but that he killed 3,000 evil spirits with his pure and immaculate sword. Then he tells her that they were so scared that their hearts broke and their souls were separated, and now they live in the intensive care ward of a psychiatric hospital. The girl also tells him that there were many others like them. At that, Ling tells him to forget about it, as he didn't expect their lives to have ended so miserably. At that, the girl takes a stone that the protagonist had in his hand and says that he had become more and more terrifying since he entered Tei's kingdom, as he could now easily turn a tin can into a rare and magical 7-colored stone. She also asks him how many women would be fascinated to the point of fortitude if he used his power to flirt with them. But at that, Ling interrupts her and tells her not to change the subject, since he had not yet told her how they ended up together. The girl replies that later, the demons got together and tried to confuse her with the aphrodisiac powder laying, the most powerful aphrodisiac in the world. She also tells him that of course she had not given up so easily and had fought to the death to get out, to which Ling exclaims that she couldn't believe it was that damned aphrodisiac again. At that point, the girl narrates how things had been, and tells how she was sent by that strange poison, and knew that she could escape for a while, but not for the rest of her life, so she suddenly thought that if her own cultivation base was destined to be taken away, then it was up to her to decide. So this one uses her power to transport herself to where Ling was chained up, approaches him and tries to kiss him, and when Ling resists, she puts him to sleep with him. Back in the present day, Ling claims to the girl that she and he were incompatible with each other, and asks how come she had chosen him. The girl replies, blushing and embarrassed, that she had obviously done it because he was handsome. To which Ling claims to him that she was lying to him, since she did want a handsome boy. Yu Shu is known as the most handsome of all the good and bad, and that although he was a Buddhist and a demon, he is a handsome demon, and that he could kill both men and women. And Ling asks him to tell her the truth. To which the girl replies that he is quite aware of himself, and that in fact he has given it a lot of thought, and judging by the results, it is by his choice that she is now the supreme being of the demonic sect, and she can still drink and be with him. So if she had not chosen him, all his people might have perished long ago just like her. At that, Ling replies that she was really an evil woman who has calculated his thoughts, but at that time he still treated her as a sister. So the prota takes her by the hand, takes off the 7-colored stone and transforming it into an engagement ring. He asks her to marry him. The girl replies that the ring is really beautiful, so he decides to keep it and refuse the wedding proposal. Ling asks him what does she mean by that, and she also asks if she had discussed it with Queen Fangsu before. The girl asks him why Queen had rejected him. To which Ling replies that she was afraid that once her son has his father's surname, this child will be isolated from others. Since the world has just settled down and the foundations are unstable, he will also be thrown in his face by the haters who hold grudges against him in the city. At that the girl tells him that Queen is absolutely right, and that he now had a lot of problems to face. She also tells him that even though he is now the strongest and most powerful man in the world, he has 3 immortals, 4 tops, 5 clans and 8 bands of senior masters hiding in seclusion, and that many of them covet his position as a revered immortal. He also explains to her that outside, in the west of Shenzhou, is the great Rakshasa in command of the countries in the western region, and that the Federation, calling itself the Kingdom of Heaven across the ocean in the east, control the neighboring countries with the East China Sea, and that they all covet him with abundant spiritual energy. So the girl tells him that he still has many difficult battles to fight, and that children will be his weakness. To which Ling replies by asking him if it is safer to hide there with all the murderous, deviant, and notorious demons of all sizes. The girl replies that he didn't have to worry about that, because his daughter was known as the little devil of the ward and is feared by the old men here, that even he had suffered her today. Ling asks him if she is not worried about her future, being so cunning and skillful at her age. The girl replies that she had also been a witch before, and that he had never worried about her. When Ling was about to answer her, she interrupts him and tells him that considering the ideals he has fought for, she has never been interested in peace and quiet, even though she is a demon at his door. But now with his daughter, she thinks it is good to have a change of life. At that, Ling tells her that he now suddenly had 2 children with 2 people he didn't expect, and that now his heart was overwhelmed by it. The girl tells him that he had better get used to that feeling, because Hu Kexin, the seductive fox, had also given him a daughter. Ling ends up terrified by the news, and screaming and asking what she was talking about. He ends up waking everyone up, and as he leaves, his little daughter watches him while her mother thinks this story was just getting interesting. Already in the air, Ling is even more terrified and overwhelmed than before. He thinks that this was not possible, since the time he had met Hu Kexin was when they were trying to establish a diplomatic alliance with the Kunlun daimyo of the southwest, and that he had a clear memory of everything, so nothing unspeakable had happened. At that, Ling stops and narrates that 12 years ago there were still 5 dragons competing for the pearl in Shenzhou, and that in the great Rakshasa kingdom in the west, they had the desire to expand eastward. So the first step was to use the Sun King of the great Rakshasas to make peace with the 9-tailed demon king Hu Kexin, leaving his 5th prince as ambassador. So the prince of the kingdom, White Knight, was in life the daimyo Kunlun, the southwest gate of Shenzhou, to make him a vassal. Ling tells us that he had been entrusted with the task sent to Kunlun, and that same day he had killed the prince with his sword, so everyone in the main hall of the kingdom of the great daimyo Kunlun was confused. In the memory, a girl appears saying that the 5th prince of the great Rakshasa had been killed and asks Ling if he thought before he acted that the great kingdom of Rakshasa would be overwhelmed by troops, and that his little demon village would be destroyed. She also tells him that he was wrong and asks him if he will now be able to endure. At that, Ling replies that she could be sure it is because she does not want to fight that she has sent a man like White Knight as her ambassador. The mysterious girl applauds him and calls him a god of killing. He is not only amazing in martial arts but also in wisdom and courage. This girl also tells him that although the great kingdom of Rakshasa does not attack with his troops, and if this makes him angry, he forces her to submit to be his eyes. The girl asks him why not wait to see how the chaos in Shenzhou changes and attack at the right time. Now we are told that the great Rakshasa are in the early stages of reunification and the throne. The kingdom distrusts each other and cannot afford a war in 10 years. Now we are still in Ling's memories. He with sword in hand thinks that if they dare to send another subject again, he will try to break them by force. At that time, Hu Kexin asks Ling if he wants to subdue the people out there, and how is he different from this great country. Now as the image of the girl is finally revealed to us, she tells the carrier that after all, the only way for them, the small borderlands caught between the great powers, to be able to achieve peace was to be subservient to them, to make peace and pay tribute. She asks Ling then what did he want to do, Mr. Ambassador, and if he wanted it all, to which Ling replies that he just wants friendship. While Hu Kexin is surprised, Ling explains that there is no distinction between big and small, peaceful coexistence and mutual help in case of danger, equal friendship. At that moment, Hu Kexin sees and tells Ling that it was too exciting for her to react, as she should digest it first. Already a few moments later, Hu Kexin starts flirting with Ling and tells her that before her sword can stand up there, please, he should advise her. Right there Hu Kexin hypnotizes the protagonist. Back to the present time, Ling is thinking as he floats in the air, and he thinks to himself that that was the problem, since he had gone back to the second day and now that he thinks about it, he didn't have a memory of the time in between, so he wonders what was going on. He also thinks that guessing and deducing was not his forte, so now he will do the best that he knew how to do. Now Ling tells us that after decades of life and death battles, facing all kinds of conspiracies and deceptions, this one had developed a new way to become a powerful force, so anyone who came before him will have to tell the truth, so he should make the fox hunter Hu Kexin. Changing scene, we are now in the main hall of the Dayu Kingdom. We see a line of soldiers. The leader tells them that the special envoy of the divine protector of the great Rakshasas was in that place. At that, Ling was peeking behind the walls of the hall, wondering if they would have diplomatic business today. At that moment, Ling thinks he should be pointing his finger at Hu Kexin and shouting questions in his face, so he wonders why he should be hiding. He also wonders what he should do now, at which point Ling is practicing what he is going to say to the girl by asking her if she had done something to him. He also practices demanding her to tell him the truth. Right there, Ling stops with the acting and thinks that was a bit aggressive. At that moment, a voice interrupts him, calling him Dad, and asks him what he was doing there. He answers without realizing that he had come to solve some problems with the demonic fox Hu Kexin. This mysterious voice also asks him why he was messing with his mother. At that, Ling reacts and turns around asking the mysterious voice who was she. He is met by a little girl who tells him it was her and calls him Daddy. Here Ling seemed to be still very distracted, but when he really realized what was going on, he shouted asking the little girl what she had just said. But Ling had shouted so loudly that he alerted the soldiers who were in the courtyard, and when they noticed, one of them said that it was a foreign enemy invasion, and that they were in the side corridor. Ling, upon seeing the soldiers, thinks that now he will not be able to make a move without attracting attention. This invokes a power called temporary inversion of heaven and earth. Now it is explained to us that one of the top 10 unique abilities that Kyan-kun invested Ling and entered the realm of Tei Shanking, as he could rewind all time and space to the state of 30 seconds, a technique with which he has defeated many powerful opponents, and now he uses this ability for something like that. Now 30 seconds earlier, again Ling meets the little girl who was telling him that she was his daughter. While the Prota thinks it is very good that this ability exists, and tells the little girl not to call him father, and that she is wrong, so Ling asks her who were her parents, and that how come she could be running around the halls of the imperial court, to which the girl replies that her mother was the demonic bitch he had just mentioned. But again Ling screams very loudly not believing what was happening, and again alerts the soldiers by repeating the story. Now we see Ling shocked and lying on the ground saying that everything had been so sudden, and that he almost lost his mind, as he had never had to fight a girl before, so he wonders what he should do now. But Ling gets up and asks the little girl if what she had just said was true. But the girl doesn't answer the question and tells him that he had finally come to see her, and that it had been 12 years and that for as long as she could remember, she had been climbing to the top of the room, looking at the moon and the stars waiting for him to arrive. She also tells him that the day before, she had seen a shooting star and made a wish, asked that her father would come down from the sky like a great hero and come to save them. But that unexpectedly, the wish had come true. In tears, Ling thinks to herself that since the girl was supposed to be 12 years old, maybe everything she says could be true. But in the face of the innocence shown by the girl who longed for her father, the venerable saint had felt extremely guilty and uncomfortable. So, kneeling down in front of the little girl, he asked her to forgive him for being late, to which the little girl asked him to please save her and her mother. And when Ling asks him what was going on, the little girl replies that the great Rakshasa kingdom sent messengers to ask the great Ming kingdom to ask for tribute. There the girl explains to him that the request was for her to marry the third prince, to which Ling thinks that this old man of the Rakshasas had the heart of a thief and that he had been thinking about it all year. She also says that this one had taken advantage of the fact that her estate was still under construction, and that this one had sneaked in again to cause trouble. But Ling gets very angry and says that this guy was not only a thief, but now he also wanted to steal her daughter, to which Ling asks the little girl to accompany him, as he would teach those Rakshasas a lesson. At that moment, the little girl gets excited and could not believe what her father was telling her. But Ling thinks to himself, why couldn't the corners of his mouth smile when this little girl showed her affection with a compliment? The Prota asks the girl to hold on tightly to him, and now these two fly out of the place. In another scene in the Ming Dynasty, a guy is talking to the queen of the Ming Dynasty. He tells her that one day had already passed, and now he asks her if she had already arranged the personal request of the second prince of the Holy King of the Great Kingdom Rakshasas and the princess of the Great Ming Kingdom. At that, Hu Kexin replied that his daughter was still too young to marry, so they would discuss it when she was older. To which the subject tells him that the Holy King had already considered this for the queen, so all that was needed was to take the little princess to the capital to receive the best education possible, while approaching the second prince and developing a relationship, and that when she is old enough to marry, she will be ready for a wedding that the world will know. Also, the subject tells her that the Ming Dynasty kingdom could also enjoy the protection of his great kingdom Rakshasas for a long time. At that, Hu Kexin replied that she, being the queen, had only one daughter, since she could not allow her to go away. And at that, the guy told her that it was all right, since the king was very considerate, and that if he did not want to let her go, he had sent his master to take care of the princess. At that, Hu Kexin tells him that although his country, the Ming Dynasty, is a small border country, there were many learned and knowledgeable people, so there was no need to bother. The guy replies that if there was really anyone in his country who could compare with the famous master, that the Holy King took great pains to prepare for the princess. When the mysterious master reveals his face, the other guy says that this was the first disciple of the great state master Rakshasas, known as the Great Bacchanata of Darkness, the master of life and death. To which the master present in the room speaks for the first time, saying that this old man had not accepted any apprentice in his life. He also says that he had heard for a long time that Her Royal Highness, the princess of the Ming Dynasty, is very talented, and that he had seen that her qualifications are really extraordinary, so that she could inherit the sacred mantle from him. To which the other fellow says that since his country is so sincere, His Majesty would not refuse the wedding proposed by the Holy King. At that, Hu Kexin tells him that it was a big deal, and that she would think it over very well. But at that moment Ling appears out of nowhere saying to forget it, as the little girl had a very good teacher already. Amidst the confusion in the room, Hu Kexin tells Ling that why hadn't he warned her of his visit earlier, and how come he was entering and barging into the palace like that. She offers her sincere respects to Ling, and Ling asks how was it possible for him to be there, and again she reproaches him for not having informed her earlier that he was coming. At that, the other two subjects are astonished to be the divine saint. One asks the other, what should he do now, since it is rumored that there is a holy deity in the land who is so strong that no one can match him. But the master replies that Shenzhuo had just been established, and that this guy intended to go there to take disciples, so they would have a lot of things to do to settle that matter. In a defiant manner, the master asks Ling if she wouldn't let him take an apprentice, and asks him to stop the show. At that, the other guy tells him that even if he wanted to spread false rumors, they couldn't do it so fast. Hu Kexin agreed and asked why did the Holy Master come to visit that family. Then she asks him why he had not come in the morning, when people were bathing naked. But at that, the little girl hugs her mother, and Hu Kexin asks her how come she had brought that man to that place. At that, Ling tells her, referring to Hu Kexin, that she was a very cunning woman and that she was good enough to take advantage of him, to which she replies that the ambassador still doesn't believe that he was the saint. At that, we see the master saying that the first saint in China wanted to recruit disciples, and that now that was a nuisance in his way, but that if he claimed to be an Eastern supreme power, he could not overlook him. So the master asks Ling to let him prove his authenticity for Shenzhou Xinyan's sake. But at that moment, the little girl tells her mother that that old man was just as cunning as them, since he used that silly excuse to attack them. But while the master activated a mysterious power, Hu Kexin wondered if this was some kind of seance. What if he was summoning the gods of the law of the world? But at that very moment, the other guy explains that there are very few sages who can be recognized as gods and use the power of the law. He also says that this is the god of death, the one who is able to impart life and death, and is even a feared existence by the other gods. To which the master says that all attacks are invalid. and this one uses the attack called Death to All Living Beings. The teacher explained that it was nothing strange, that he had only asked this saint for help. But while the little girl realized that it was getting very cold, her father covered her with his power and asked her if she was better, to which the little girl replied that she was, and that she no longer felt cold. Now while the master continues to attack, Ling wonders what kind of seance was that. She also asks if anyone had heard of the mysteries of Eastern transmutation, to which the Proto activates a power much greater than that of the master. And while the other subjects could not believe what was happening, Ling's summoning easily crushes the master's summoning, and at that the Proto tells them to go tell the king that although Shenju is a tentative option, as long as he was there, they can't do what they want. She then demands that the guys get out of her sight, and find out why her Prince Bai was crippled for 12 years. After having expelled those two guys, the little girl asks her mother if she had planned all this so that her father would come to save them. But her mother replied that she had not, and that the messenger had come all of a sudden, so she wondered how the Holy Master had found out about all this. As Ling was about to answer, he was interrupted by his little daughter, and now she said that she had caught him and that His Majesty had finally been deceived. At that the girl asks if it was true that he was her father. Her mother replies that she was right and that he had caught her, to which the girl is very happy because she had finally found her father. To which she turns to her mother to tell her that her father was very handsome, a bit of a brute, but very powerful. She also asks him why she had chosen someone like him, and while Ling asks her what was it that they talked so much about, Hu Kexin replies to her daughter that it seemed like the right people had met at the right time. At that, the Proto comes up to them and tells them not to believe that he wasn't listening. But Hu Kexin tells him that he really had no mercy on his daughter. He also says that her skirt outfit was unique, and was cut by the air flow he had created. So he asks her to come with him to change her clothes. As they were about to leave, the little girl asked them where they were going, and she asked them to wait for her and not to leave her alone. Once in the dormitories, the girl asks her father why he did not look at her mother since she is beautiful, to which Ling asks him why he talks that way about her mother at such a young age. But the little girl responds by asking him, what kind of man doesn't look at a woman as beautiful as his mother? For that meant that her mother was very attractive. At that, Ling asks her how her mother usually educates her. The girl answers her to use all her charms to bend her opponent, to use softness to overcome rigidity, and that if she did not want something, that she should leave. She also says that her mother had taught her that she should strike first. But at that, Hu Kexin appears saying that she was a very intelligent child. And Ling asks her how she had been able to a child like that. To which Hu Kexin replies that that little girl is a quick learner, and that the tiger and the monkey had been very fond of her and plays along. But Ling is in disbelief and asks him to tell her what he was doing. Now we see Hu Kexin explaining to Ling that the little girl had become sensible, and that she had always asked him about her father, but that she had never told him. But at that Ling asks her daughter if it seemed too embarrassing for her to have a father who is a deity. Now Hu Kexin says that it was just a game they had, so the mother had told her daughter that she should find out for herself. To which the little girl tells her that several people had helped her in searching the directory of foreign affairs in the kingdom, as it listed all the people who had lived there in a range of 10 years. The little girl explains that she had searched one by one, until there were only a few left, and among those few was him. And now he had arrived there by surprise, so she knew. And then the wind did its work, and as her mother says, her hero always appears when they need him most. At that Ling said that now she understood everything, and that her mother had really been educating her well. To which Hu Kexin explains that the little girl as the next queen of the country would be very beneficial to move throughout the nation. This would help them a lot in the future since they could face the royal groups of demons. At that, Ling turns to her daughter telling her then not to be a princess, but a happy child. But Hu Kexin tells her that the world was not yet peaceful, so the royal family should bear the burden first. Ling replied that the peace he wanted was not just for one country, but a sincere world peace, so he wanted his children to live a carefree life. At that the excited girl asked her father why people hated being a saint. Since they could learn many things, memorize a lot of information and could taste delicious food, she also said, what more could you ask for? At that Hu Kexin tells him that 12 years ago, what he had done was taken as a juvenile joke, but she was looking forward to it coming true. But at that, the protagonist remembers the real reason why he was in that place, and claims to Hu Kexin that it happened a long time ago, and asks him what the hell did he do to her at that time, because he could not remember anything. At that very moment, the little girl asks her mother what trick had she used on her father's heart, to which Hu Kexin replies that as expected of her little girl, she was very smart. Here Ling asks her what was her intention, and Hu Kexin answers her that her country had been founded hundreds of years ago, so she not only had prestige, she also had good descendants. So the first thing was strength and friendship, then use power in the second time. But most of those people are invincible and practical, so she could have many love partners. But what if there was no means of cleansing, and how could she stand firm in that relationship? At that the girl mentions that her mother had told her that she belonged to the fox family, so for that reason, she possessed an enchanting soul. After that she asks her mother why she had chosen her father years ago, if he was not as powerful as the masters of that time. Hu Kexin answers that it was something unique, because she was captivated by his courage and openness. At that Ling very angrily tells them that women are dangerous people, but Hu Kexin asked him if he had any other women, and that he should tell them. At that, the little girl said that she wanted to hear her father's story, to which he went on to tell them things from his past of lesser relevance. But an hour later, the girl is quite indignant, and says how could those girls not have married her father, so she tells him that he should marry her mother first. Now while Hu Kexin tells her that this would not be right, the girl asks why. At that, Ling explains to her that marriage between two leaders of two countries involves much more than just the two of them, since if she marries him, the Yu kingdom would be being incorporated into Shenzhou, so opposition forces in such a large country are not allowed, and there is a great risk of provoking a civil war. Hu Kexin compliments by telling his little daughter that marriage between the two was impossible, since when a divine state was established, everyone was on their own. The very frustrated girl thinks that she obviously had not found her father. At that, the little girl wonders if people would love her like that, and she yells at her parents that she hated them so much and runs away. While Ling tries to chase her, Hu Kexin stops him and explains that this was what she had to put up with because she was born into the royal family, that she was like that herself and even her mother, but fortunately for her, she had been able to choose her daughter's father at will. At that, Ling tells her that because she is the only daughter, they had to give her a lot of attention, and that he would come up with something. Now we see that Hu Kexin asks Ling to please accompany her daughter before she leaves, as it would make her very happy. And while Ling asks her how did she know that, she explains that foxes, when they were happy, would wag their tails by themselves, so that was more obvious than even her words. At that Ling asks her if she was happy too. Hu Kexin replied that at that moment, just a little bit. At nightfall on the roof of the temple, Ling approaches his daughter to talk to her. Then he remembers when Hu Kexin had told him that when foxes are happy, their tails move by themselves, and that spoke louder than 1,000 words. Ling apologizes to her daughter, and she replies that she did not have to apologize, since children like her did not yet understand the things of adults. Just then, Ling thinks that if this little girl's mother hadn't told him that, he wouldn't have realized how happy her daughter was to see him. When Ling strokes the little girl's head, she asks him why is he touching her head, since she didn't know him well, and that he was only her biological father. To which Ling replies that he had promised her that when he saw her, he would give her a present. So he asked the little girl what she wanted him to give her. The excited little girl replied that she wanted a star. At that, Ling stands up and tells her that he would give her one. At that moment, he uses his power so that his daughter can fly with him. She couldn't believe she was flying, so she asks her father to take her higher. When both are already in the night sky, the girl is very impressed and says that this was the first time she was so close to the moon and stars. At that moment her father tells her that now he is going to show her something, so she invokes a power mentioning that between the sun and the stars, this Supreme One calls you. While Ling invokes one of the stars, the people of the village, terrified, thought that the world was ending because the stars were falling. And at that Hu Kexin looks out of a window and says that this was worthy of a saint, and that is always he likes to do things in a showy way. Back in heaven, the little girl asks her father if he doesn't think it was too close, to which Ling replies not to worry, because with him by her side, there is nothing in this existence that can harm her. Now he summons a power called Celestial Palm to stop the star, which was speeding towards the earth. At that moment, Ling shrinks the star and gives it to his daughter. She thinks it is very beautiful, and Ling asks her if she liked the gift. But the girl replies, don't think that's why she forgave him. Ling laughs and the little girl asks her what was so funny. Ling replied that her mother had told her that they wagged their tails when they were happy. At that the little girl gets very angry and hits her father, telling him that she hated him and that it had been so long since she had seen him, and that her mother and her family are always harassed. Ling replies that she knows that, and that's why from now on, if anyone ever tries to hurt them, they should just call him. No matter how far away he is, he will come right away. The girl asks him if he was serious, to which Ling replied that of course he did, since that was a promise. The girl says that she believes in her father while sneezing from the cosmic dust in space. At that, Ling tells her that the stars could not be taken just like that, and tells her that they should take her back. At that point, the little girl's name is revealed to us when he asks her what her name is. She replies that her name is Xuan Xuan. Ling tells him that that is a nice name and that he will remember it. Now we see Hu Kexin looking at the sky and very touched to see Xuan Xuan with her father having fun. At that, Ling says that it was already very late, that they should rest early, and that there are still important things to do in the country, but that he would leave first. Xuan Xuan asks him to come and see her and her mother more often, to which Ling proposes that they make a promise, and that this promise could not be broken for another 100 years. But Xuan Xuan says that her mother must also promise in order to create this promise. Ling hesitates a little, but while Hu Kexin places her little finger, little Xuan Xuan tells her father to do it. The latter replies that if so, he would not or would refuse. Hu Kexin tells him that he should say those words, that if not, it would not be a promise. Ling rather indignantly says that was a pinky promise. Hu Kexin mentions that for 100 years it could not be broken. At that, Ling leaves, already in heaven and very impressed by what had happened. He thinks that this can't be happening to him. That being a deity, how can he think about that? He also wonders why his mind is in chaos again. So he should take a deep breath to calm down a bit. The venerable Saint Ling could be very nervous about being a father, and therefore this was a new experience for him. Because of that, he developed a new transcendental spell called World Swallower. Now a little calmer, he thinks that having children with 3 women is too much, that he was not prepared for this and wonders how he will do it. But at that moment, he remembers that he could discuss the matter with a guy named Wen Yufeng, since he was the guy they called the senior counselor, and there is no one better than him, so Ling decides to go in search of him. Changing scenes, Ling finds himself in front of a cozy cabin. He wonders what should he say to that guy. But at that moment the door opens and there is Wen Yufeng. He tells Ling that if he didn't use to push the door and enter, and asks him what's wrong this time. Wen asks Ling to sit down to eat with him. Ling, tasting the food, says that making a stove with a chessboard, only Wen could do that. Wen Yufeng tells him that he had used up all his energy on the unification of China, and that he only had a little left for cooking, drinking wine and enjoying himself. At that, the Proto explains to us that since ancient times, strategists had followed their own ideals as they can change their destiny. But this guy had raised his level of change to a higher, terrifying point. He also tells us that humans plan to conspire, the gods seek Yang, but that from heaven all possible futures could be calculated. All existing conspiracies, as there was no escaping this power. Ling also explains that after doing this, they exhaust their life power more and more until they return to the human world. Now Ling remembers when she last saw Wen Yufeng. The Proto was telling her that Shenju was already fully configured, and what should she do now? Wen replies to him that his heaven only ended at that time, but his future now depends on the venerable saint and his safety to keep him going. He tells Ling that he had found a thatched hut, and that he could go and chat with him when he needed to. Back in the present, Wen asks him what was going on, and why did he go looking for him. Ling gets very nervous not knowing how to tell him what was going on, and at that Wen asks him if he has a friend who has a problem recently, to which Ling replies that that was correct and that was the way things were. Wen asks her if that friend was in love and suddenly had a child. Ling tells him that he is correct, and tells him that he knew that he is back the realm of calculation, to which Wen replies that he shouldn't change the subject, and that he'd better tell him about his friend. At that, and still nervous, Ling tells him that his friend was always busy with his work, and that he hardly ever talks to anyone about women, but that however, he discovered that he suddenly had children with strange women, and his friend now didn't know what to do. Ling drinks some tea and says that his friend asked him to discuss that, since he was a badass bachelor. At that, Wen mentions to him that this friend was very cruel. Now Ling wonders what was happening to him, and that he didn't want to help him, but that his friend was begging him to help him because he trusts him. So he asks what should he do, and he says that's why he had come to see him, and asks Wen to give him some ideas. Now while Wen finishes eating, he tells Ling that he was a very kind person and that it's not that people live in a bad world. They just live very worried. At that, Ling gets angry and tells Wen that for the sake of his brothers, this one should die, and that if anything happened to this one, it was because he was worried. But Wen asks him to calm down and that he very much understood that worry, and also asks him to let him go, as he now had a very weak body. At that, Ling says that it was good to know, so he asks her to give him some ideas on how to solve it so he can continue working. Now right at that moment, Wen bursts out laughing, saying he couldn't take it anymore. Ling gets angry and asks him who he thought he was playing with, to which Wen replies that 15 years ago, he made the only day in heaven of his life. But Ling asks him why is he mentioning that now, and Wen answers by asking him if he had not told him that day in heaven is a celestial and magical technique that calculates all the possibilities and plans that are in people's minds. Now Wen explains that in fact, only the experimenter knew the secret, because what appears in Tian's mind are not the arithmetic symbols and words like the 9 palaces, 4 loaves, the 16 trigrams, and the celestial stalks. He then tells us that this was the actual image of each scene, starting from the beginning so he could see all the possibilities: failure, near success, and many possibilities of success. Tian didn't understand much of what was going on, so Wen keeps explaining, and Wen tells him that there were several scenarios, and that he had also ruled the world, but that Tian had turned into bones 5 years ago to save his life. He explains that there was also an ending where Shenju turns a single person into a being with 1,000 hands that destroys every living thing. At that, Tian tells him that was pretty amazing, to which Wen tells him that with his adventure, he and Qian Fengsu, the affair with Huan and Hu Kexin, is the result of choosing a certain future starting point from the beginning of the calculation. At that moment, Ling, terrified, asks him if it was Da Yao's call, and he complains to Wen that Wen always knew everything from the beginning. To which Wen replies that he did not know, and that Ling knew better than him. Again, Ling gets angry and asks Wen why he didn't tell him before. What if she was doing it to make him feel embarrassed? But Wen tells him to take it easy, as his weak body cannot withstand her strength. At that, Ling asks him how does it feel to be the most powerful being in the world, since no one could escape from Wen Yufeng. The latter replies to him that it is not what he thought, since the real powerful being was Ling. At that, Wen also tells him that Juaito now he had just finished making a decision, and everything else will be up to Ling and his philosophy to get a good result. Now Ling asks him why he had not applied to rule the world with his talent, since maybe the world would be better off that way. But Wen pours some more tea and replies to her that in that end, no matter how it happens, there is nothing like cooking stew while talking about life. He then offers some tea to Ling, and they end up toasting to each other's health.